And so now we are going to the 10 next cards from the dynamic skill theory, which are the trust cards. So this light green emotion. So the first one is Time Traveler. And simple effect. Players get time counters until they have 3 time counters. Fairly simple effect, but something that we don't often do. We have a few cards in this set that does that we gain some stuff before a certain threshold, before a certain level. And so I feel like this card is really interesting, because if you have it in your hand, and you know that you'll be able to play it in the future, it kind of gives you the knowledge that you can use all your time counters now, because you're gonna gain up to 3 later, while the opponent doesn't know that. So once you play, the opponent would be able to use its time counter to answer, if they can. But, so on one hand, you have this knowledge, and on the other, it kind of forces the opponent to answer it, so they gain more time counters. So I really like to be able to have these kind of effects that add a lot of interesting choices in the game without being too complicated. Second card is Friendship, artwork by Nick Jay-Z. Yeah, I think it's the first time she drew some seedlings. So the effect, it's a mechanic that already existed prior, which is opponent choose. So as you play this card, as it enters the mind, your opponent is going to choose whether both players show 2 cards, or whether they both get 1 time counter. And then you, as the player of this card, is going to gain some influence. So, fairly simple. Usually when we add effects that already existed from previous sets, it's because we want to have more options for some particular decks, or we want to kind of push these things. So here we kind of want to push the idea that you can get time counters outside of just having them during the game, at the beginning of your turn. We want this manipulation of time counter to be more of a part of this color. So we add more effects that do that in this color. And that's pretty much it for this card. The third one is Open Up. So Open Up, it's again the mechanic opponent choose. And so this time the opponent is going to choose whether you will displace a card from their deck, or whether you will draw a card from their deck. So displace is an effect from the second set, that basically here it allows you to look through their deck. You're going to take 1 card from it, and you're going to force them to play it. So it can be really good, depending on how much of your opponent's deck you know. Because they might have cards that are quite conditional, and might be bad for them if they play them at the wrong time. So it's quite of a nice effect, but here it's kind of mitigated by the fact that your opponent is choosing whether you can do that. So it's always, because since it's a chill thought, we don't want it to be too powerful. So here, it's really the opponent that has the choice. Fourth card, the Ball. So, simple effect. You draw 1 card from opponent's deck, and then you show it. So there's only a few colors that are able to draw cards without drawbacks. And every color has its own way of drawing cards. So the simplest one, for Joy, they just draw a card. Plain and simple. For this color, usually the way they do it is that they draw cards from the opponent's deck, and then they discard cards. So here we don't have this drawback of discarding a card, but we have the drawback of having to show the card, so the opponent knows what you got. Which once again, fairly simple effect, but has a really neat way of being played. It really adds some interest to the game, where first of all you're gonna have a card that you didn't put in your deck, so a card that you're still gonna be able to play because your opponent is playing these colors, and the opponent is able to know what this card is. So I like it. Fifth, we have the Idea. So the idea, its effect is you show one card you have in hand, and then you get one time counter. Kind of similar to the previous card, but this card, this time, instead of drawing a card, you're gonna get a time counter, and you're gonna gain some influence. Because on average, usually drawing a card is better than getting a time counter. Because you can always play card by discarding another one, so it's always slightly better to draw cards. So that's why here we kind of also make this card gain some influence, to kind of try to keep it balanced and to add another interest to it. So you're gonna have to show a card from your hand, but then you're gonna get a time counter, and in addition you're gonna gain some influence if there are any joy or fear cards in the mind. 6. The first strong card for this color is Sweet Dreams. So Sweet Dreams, again a new interesting effect. So we saw that with the first card from these colors, which allowed players to gain time counters until they reach a specific number. So here we have the same thing but with drawing cards. So it's one of the new mechanics from DST for this color, which kind of gives both players similar things until a certain point. And so here, players draw until they have 5 cards in hand, so it's a really strong effect. Especially if you know that it's gonna happen. Because it basically allows you to play a lot of cards and to kind of empty your hand and to then play Sweet Dreams. It's a bit dangerous because it could be silenced, your opponent could stop it from happening. But if your opponent doesn't, it's a great reward. And still your opponent would still be able to answer it with a lot of different cards, so that they empty their hand as much as possible, and are then able to draw as much as possible. So it's once again an effect that I really like, because it's simple, but it creates a lot of option for deck building around it, and a lot of option for strategizing around it. Next is Slug Quest, drawn by Nick Jay-Z, and we come back with some merge mechanic. So here you merge seedlings. For every color, they basically merge their lowest type, their chill type, because each color has basically one type that is chill, one type that is strong, and one type that is intense. And so for this color, the chill type is seedlings. So as this card enters the mind, you're gonna merge any number of seedlings that you want, and then you're gonna have access to this effect. It's an instant effect, meaning that you can do it in response to anything. And it states that you can forget one merged seedling in order to copy the effect of one entering opponent thought. So when an opponent thought enters, and you have merged some seedlings, so you have some seedling cards underneath this one, you can forget one of them and copy the effect of the thought that just entered. So it's really strong. It's a really strong effect, but the downside, there are 2 downsides. The first one is that you have to merge some seedlings, meaning that you lose some of your colors from the mind. And the second downside is that this card, Slug Quest, doesn't gain anything, it doesn't gain influence. So as it enters, it doesn't do anything. You just merge and you hope to be able to use its effect. But the card could get forgotten by some other effects of other cards. It could get silenced, a lot of things could happen. So it's really a double-edged sword, as a lot of the merge cards are. But the side of the sword that would help you is really powerful. Next, we have Congregation. It's the other merge card for this color. Every color has 2 merge cards. So this one you merge 0 or more seedlings, and then you have a static effect. If your turn ends, players draw 1 card per merged seedling. So that's a really good effect, but it's an effect that applies to both players. But if you create a deck yourself, if you build a deck yourself, there are some cards that would make it so your opponent either wouldn't draw these cards or would get a downside every time they draw them. So, in a randomized deck, most often than not, it's just an interesting card that could help you gain an advantage over time. But in a pre-constructed deck, in a deck that you build yourself, it might be a piece that might be the core of your deck and might make it really annoying to play against or really powerful. So I like it. I also really like the drawing. We have this cute slug kind of having a meeting with the seedlings. Ninth, we have Family Reunion. So Family Reunion, it has a static effect which states link this column. Linked thoughts can't leave the mind. So link is one of the new keywords for this set. For this color and the next, they both have link. And so here what it means, if you think of the mind in Mind World, so you have these 4 rows of 3 spots, 3 chambers, and basically every player has 6 chambers. And so you have 3 columns and 4 rows. And so when you play this card, all the cards in its column will get linked. And then the effect is that linked thoughts can't leave the mind. So as this card enters, all the cards in this column are linked. As long as this card is here, they are all linked, and none of them can leave the mind. Whether it is by effects that ask them to be forgotten, or whether it is by putting a card on top of it. So that's actually an important caveat to that. It's an important edge case for this effect, that since the link thought can't leave the mind, usually when you play a card on top of another, the previous one, the one underneath, gets forgotten. Here, the reminder text of this effect tells you that if a card gets on top of one of these linked thoughts, it's actually this new card that gets forgotten, because the others can't leave the mind. So it also overrides this rule of the game. So it's a very interesting effect. I'm not sure how much. I guess there are some cards that would play well with it. So that if you have some other static effects that are really strong, or stuff that maybe, let's say your opponent has some intense thought on their side of the mind, and you want them to not be able to play another one. So you're gonna place this one in its column, and so their intense thought is never gonna be able to leave, and they won't be able to play a new intense thought, because you can only play one, basically. As long as you have another one in the mind, as long as you have another one in play, you cannot play another one. So it kind of locks them out of playing more intense thoughts. That's one of the ways in which this card can be really strong. And finally, the last one is Solemn Decay, another shroom. And its effect is also a link effect. Static, link this row. Linked thoughts are counted twice when calculating influence. So, fairly simple, fairly strong effect. You place this card on the mind, and all the cards in its row, so itself and the one on its left or right, will count twice when calculating influence. So let's say you have 2 other of this color in the mind. Rather than counting them 1, 2, 3, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it doubles the amount of influence that they give.